Adam, you talked yesterday about encountering people anew. I loved that. I actually wrote that down. I hope others did as well. And that's a wonderful thing. But we can also experience life anew, right? And we can experience our faith anew. And there's so many ways we can do that if we turn our attention and we put our outlook towards that and our determination to achieve that. If we do it together as a family or with some friends, it makes it even more special. So Adam and I want to really talk about, for the next right thing, this idea of creating for this weekend a little spiritual maybe pilgrimage or retreat or spiritual experience for you to enter into by yourself, with family, with friends, however your life looks and however is best for you. But you can do it this weekend. You just have to plan it now, though, because if you wait until you say, well, okay, I'm going to go to the Saturday Vigil Mass, or I'm going to go to Sunday Mass, the weekend's over. Let's face it, folks, and everybody's planning for Monday. That's just the way life works. So if you start now and think, what could we do that is a new spiritual experience? And it could be something so small, and we're going to give you some ideas. And hopefully you guys will start to plan out something now for your family, and then tell us about it next week. Maybe you could put it in the chats, or you can email us, or you can when we open up the phone lines, you can call in and just share how your weekend was different. What do you say, Adam?
Yeah, so doing something new, that's kind of the key phrase that you just used there, I think, for this. So little spiritual projects. A few things that I have found, Deb, that have been really powerful. I had heard this phrase a long time ago, that the best way to learn something is to teach it. And I think it was actually Richard Feynman said that in an interview. He's a physicist from Caltech. I think it was him. Now, the same thing applies to like writing a blog. One of the things that, I always cringed at writing. I never really studied it. I never thought I had a knack for it. I felt grammar was overwhelming, that I was always making mistakes. But here I am, and like God's got me writing books, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 now, and, a few more are in the pipeline. But what I've learned, Deb, one of the most powerful ways to learn something deeply is to write about it deeply. So, yes, if you could like teach a workshop or prepare to, teach a 2 or 3 day class or something like that, you're going to learn a ton if you prepare well. But you can do a little version of this as a weekend spiritual project, where you could think of it as a blog or an essay, however you want to think about it. But here's the fun thing. So much material, real material, is online now. Not the Wikipedia, stuff that isn't, backed up by peer review and solid. But there's, tons of Vatican documents on different spiritual topics that are real things that came out of the councils, or ecumenical councils, documents from the popes. Tons of it, and it's real, solid material. There's a lot of solid material on the saints if you dig for it. And there's a lot of digitized older books on the history of different aspects of spirituality and religion that in the past you would have had to go to like some rare books room and try to find a place that actually had a copy of it, and it would be obscure. But now it's all scanned. There's a ton of it that's scanned. So you find out, the best source for this is, this book by Teresa of Avila. And then you look and you realize that the PDF of it, it's right there online, instantly available. I have learned a ton from writing about things. And I'm so grateful to God, because I think it's the way God is kind of really teaching me the faith more deeply. Every time I go over a topic or touch on a topic again, and I mean go deep, not just like basic bullet points, but, get into the scripture, get into the different translations of it, get into the, if there's a certain word that you're really struggling with, go back to the Greek or the Hebrew. You can do that online really easily now. Find a valid, valid translation or valid original, I should say, of the Bible, and go deep into that word. What was it in the Hebrew if it's Old Testament, Greek if it's New? Maybe it was Aramaic. There's a few parts of the Bible that are in Aramaic. You don't have to go and learn Greek, but you can pull it up on a Greek dictionary online and drill down into it, and it'll just open up a whole other level of your faith. So that would be my first tip, would be a little writing project, but really challenge yourself. Footnotes, dig into primary sources. Don't just say like, oh, Bob over in California said this, but dig into the primary sources, really authoritative stuff. And by forcing yourself to write it well, you have to understand it well.
Right. I love that idea. That's actually brilliant, and I think that produces a lot of good fruits that come out of it. Spiritual depth, like you're saying, the formation. I totally would agree with that. For me, because of the way I learn, I'm a very visual learner, very creative thinker. I've always been that way. As a small child, I was the best daydreamer you could ever imagine. In fact, the nuns used to always comment about that. So anyway, and I always did really good in school too. I was good grades, but I really should have done more in that area. But I will tell you, if you're a creative thinker and you're a visual person, to experience the beauty of the faith is another way to get deeply formed in the faith. So a perfect example would be to go into a new church, a new Catholic church that you haven't been in for a while, and really sit and take in every single picture and statue and stained glass and, image and writings that are on the wall, or murals or something of that nature, or the way things are adorned, or the way things are, structured in the church. Take it in from the moment you walk into the doors of the church all the way to the back of the altar, to the tabernacle, and really breathe it in and understand it, and be in this sense of letting it overwhelm you, to the sense in the sense that it brings you to a spiritual awakening and depth in a way. You talk about all the time, Adam, and I love how you do that, about how stained glass, the reason why we have stained glass in churches was really to teach and to preach and to keep the story alive, right? And it really does have a meaning that is, because there wasn't things written down, and so the stained glass or images are a way for us to really tell the story. And it is true, but when we meditate on that, there's another level of depth that is acquired and that is learned in a way that you cannot even describe where it can take you to. And so the reason why we know that is when people go to Italy, for instance, and see the beautiful cathedrals and basilicas and churches that are just, they look like they're reaching all the way up to the sky. It's unbelievable how tall they are, and it's so detailed. It's amazing what people will say who aren't Catholic when they go into these places in Italy or in France or in Spain or all over the place, where they'll say, oh my goodness, I'm not even Catholic, but I came out of there and I felt so different. I felt like I just felt closer to God. There was something there. And it's so true. And so I would encourage you folks that if Adam, you're such an academic and such you're so logical and intellectual, and you're a very deep thinker. For me, it's much more of a visual sense that has always, and it's also stories. You talked about stories this week. I love hearing people's testimonies. I think the Christian witness is so powerful, and I love hearing the stories. That's why I think I've always been drawn to the parables. I just love that. But it for me, I need to have it be, it taps all the senses. And so it's really quite interesting. And I think people need to determine, which way they best learn. What do you say?
Mm-hmm. And one thing to do is either you could do it on your phone, you could do it with pen and paper. I know that's blows would blow people's minds today, but it does
pen
exist.
And paper?
Yeah, yeah. It leaves marks that you can't edit. Yeah, you'd have to cross them out. No, we're just old people being funny now. But take notes, because if you pay attention, you're going to find a few surprising things or confusing things where you're going to be like, well, I don't understand what that image is in that stained glass window. Like, what's going on?
What image was this recent that you saw this, or how long ago? Recently?
Well, I saw a painting that was a copy of what was in this church, and then I went and found images of it to confirm that it was there. And it was an image of Jesus giving communion to angels. And that had just never, it never crossed my mind to even think about that. And so I was like, is this for real? And then I looked it up and I'm like, where is this painting over in Rome? And yes, it's in a major church over there. It's been there for, since the Middle Ages. And then I stumbled across one of the titles for Jesus is Bread of Angels.
Bread of Angels, because they're his angels. They're Christ's angels.
Well, yes, but that they could receive communion is so interesting, right? Because we think of the Eucharist, and it very much is matter, where it's the veiled body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, but it's very physical. And as, one of your favorite saints, Blessed Carlo Acutis, did all those stories on Eucharistic miracles, right? Well, the hosts actually bleed in these Eucharistic miracles, and they get validated, that it really is human blood, and it can't be explained. It was under observation when it happened. It's not somebody faking it. We think of this, the Eucharist, as a very physical thing. And when there's Eucharistic miracles, it's very physical. Well, angels don't have any physicality. Right? Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because we know angels appeared and, drank and ate with Abraham, right? So if God wants, they can take on a body in a sense, like not take on somebody else's, but they can basically create a body. And then you wonder, people will say well, no, it was just an illusion that they were eating. It was done for his benefit, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, the basic understanding is angels are spiritual. They're not physical. So how are they receiving communion? What is he feeding them? Is he feeding them a spiritual reality? But if the Eucharist is so tightly tied to the bread of life discourse, the word that he used, that you eat my blood, eat my body and drink my flesh, the word translated to eat is gnaw, like chew on.
Right.
It's a very physical thing. So I'm still, kind of waiting and poking around. I haven't made it a big project, but I want to understand the theology of this. And it blew my mind. If I hadn't been looking at many, many different images from these older cathedrals and churches, I wouldn't have stumbled across it.
It's very interesting. We could spend a lot of time on this. I wish we had a few more minutes to talk about this, but maybe we could address it on the spirit world. But you're talking about in the Psalms where it's talked about this spiritual nourishment, right? The spiritual nourishment, and I think that's what you're tapping into, and you want to go deeper to see where this comes to be. But I will tell you something that's been interesting in studying angels. I've heard this said many times, and it always used to bother me because of the term bread of angels. That people would say, oh, if there's one thing that the angels would be jealous about, the one thing, if they ever could be jealous, if they ever could feel jealousy, it would be that we could receive the Eucharist. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but that's always been said over the years about the angels. And I think we miss so much because there's so much we don't understand about the angels. But the one thing that I always go back to, and you can find it in the Catechism, is when I made the comment earlier that they are Christ's angels. They were created through him, for him. Okay, they're his angels. And so one thing that we need to understand is that we are trying to learn about something that is so mysterious to us, right? There's so many things that we don't know what that really means to be completely pure spiritual beings, right? And we're not. We're body and soul composite, right? So, I mean, I've often said this so many times with the angels. I think we are just barely scratching the surface with the angelic realm. And you just finished a book completing on the history of angels, and I know you went into the archangels. And did you find that we barely, as human beings just walking in this advanced world that we live in, we're just scratching the surface with the angels?
Absolutely. Kind of the conclusion, that I came to after writing this book was angels are very surprising. The reality is unexpected. It's more variable than you would think. It's not simple. It's not simple and predictable. The word angel, we always say it means messenger, but, it is used in different ways, in different situations, and it does have different meanings.
Right.
When you see angel of the Lord, it basically means God appearing himself. Well, angel of the Lord, you would say, well, that's messenger of the Lord. But no, in the Old Testament, when they said angel of the Lord, they meant God.
God.
So the word is not as simple as we initially think.
I agree.
And when you look at all the ways they manifest and the things that they do, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And the amount of power that, if God wills it, that they exhibit is, it's staggering.
Well, see, it's interesting. So you talk about that image that's in Italy, and it doesn't surprise me that Christ would spiritually nourish in because it's all about being connected. It's all about being connected to the vine. It's all about being connected to God. And I just go back to that every time anytime I look at anything in theology or in our major beliefs in our church, it's all about connection and the proper connection. It's about where there's nothing getting in the way. And that's the beauty of trying to get in a state of grace, stay in a state of grace. So you clear those channels so you can receive the most you can possibly receive on this side of the veil. We're never going to know everything on this side of the veil because it's just, we're limited, right? But it's so interesting to me. I've learned that, and it's taken me, almost 60 years to get here. But it's amazing. I almost wish we could do a whole, religious education class at early elementary age just on keeping this connection clear, the channels clear. It's so important. So that doesn't surprise me that there would be an image like that.
The final thing that I would say, in terms of the next right thing, for a little spiritual project you could do over this very weekend, would be do something new in your faith, something basically completely new. Maybe you did it once or twice years ago, but give God an extra hour as opposed to just going to Mass on Sunday.
I love that.
Find something new. If you haven't been to adoration in years, and if you went and you spent 10 minutes and got bored and left, go spend an hour in adoration. Take a notebook with you and just let it soak in. Do something completely new. If you're not into the rosary, and maybe, the big secret is you don't know how to pray it. You don't know all the steps. Go learn it. Try it once. See what it's like. See how long it takes. See how it feels to you. Try something completely new in your faith and see what doors that opens for you in terms of understanding and grace.
I love that. And I would just say, since I talked about the vine and the branches, maybe as a family, read John 15 and just really meditate upon that and start to practice it, because that's what Carlo Acutis did his whole 15 years of life.
Thank you for listening to The Next Right Thing with angel specialist Debbie Georgianni and religious demonologist Adam Bly. Debbie and Adam are daily contributors to the live radio program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey every weekday on the Guadalupe Radio Network. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.